Welcome. Here's a copy of the syllabus. Sorry, I was lost. Oh, that's okay. Here's a copy of the syllabus if you want to. Okay, so my name is Michelle Miller, and I am a biology instructor here, and I've been here for over 20 years. And I teach human anatomy and physiology, a section of it with Kristen Moya. I'm teaching the other section. And I also teach general biology and global ecology and conservation. And I also teach yoga and advanced fitness class called MIA, if you're interested in those as well. So this is, I guess, only my second time teaching this particular class, because as most of you realize, this is a new class that was implemented to kind of cover the chemistry and the cell biology necessary to jump right into the human AMP sequence. And so in the past, what students did is they often took Chem 110, which is a chemistry class. The good thing about taking this class instead of just a chemistry class is that this combines the genetics component that you actually have to have now for the nursing requirements. And so by getting the genetics component out of the way early on, then you don't have to take a human genetics class when you're actually in the nursing program. So it's actually a good thing that we're combining kind of what we need specifically for chemistry and cell biology, and then the genetics is on top of that. So hopefully most of you are familiar with Canvas, and this is our new learning management system that you will be using in order to access the different parts of the class, including the online homework. And so if you go to here, you'll notice there's actually a copy of the syllabus. Maybe some of you might have saved that or printed it off. And our textbook is actually an online version of the textbook. There's also printed copies in the bookstore. So you can click on the textbook right here, and it'll take you directly to a link to the textbook. And we decided to move away from traditionally published textbooks because they were so expensive. And so although this is not probably the best textbook, it's definitely not the best textbook, but it is relatively cheap, and it's actually free to you if you just want to use the online version of it. So in order to try to keep costs down, we decided to go away from the main publishers like Pearson and McGraw-Hill that had books that were like $200. So I apologize, some of the images are not really flashy like they are in the expensive textbooks, but they serve their purpose really well. If you look here, you'll notice that there is a student lounge. And so you can go in here and you can post like, is anybody interested in starting up a study group, right? And that's, you might be able to get together. You might say that I don't understand this particular question, and you can post it on there as well. And then you have 2 assignments that have already been added to your Canvas, which are due by Sunday at midnight. So you want to go in here and just do your introductions assignment. So this is just a discussion assignment where you're going to go in and just write a little bit about yourself, like what your background is, what your interests are. And then chapter 1 quiz. And so this is an open book quiz, open book and notes. It doesn't allow you to, this is cell biology, here's a syllabus. It doesn't allow you to do multiple attempts. So you just have one attempt at the quiz. Some instructors have it so that you can do multiple attempts, but this is just one attempt. And it's just 10 questions, and it's primarily over the reading, right? So it's over that chapter in the book. So you can have the book open, right? And you could have it open on in a different window. You can go back and forth. And then as soon as you submit it, that is where you'll actually find out whether or not you're answering. Okay, so are there any questions about Canvas? Does everybody feel pretty comfortable? Are you in the right class?
Nope.
No? Which class are you looking for?
232.
Are you looking for 213 maybe as well?
Just whatever biology class. Yes.
Okay, so it is down this hall, and if you turn and you go around, are you familiar with this building?
No.
Okay, so let me just point you the right direction.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay. So majors biology, if you just go down here, of course, is 202, 212, right? And it's just right there, 206.
Thank you.
Yep. You didn't find any. Okay. Any questions about Canvas? Yes. Okay.
So when I'm going to pull up right here, when I'm under biology 112, when I click on home, it shows the introduction segment and talk about this, but I'm not seeing like textbook or.
Yeah, I didn't see the text. I came across that.
Are you just on the assignments? Because you have to go over here,
It's on the home. Yeah, I didn't see that.
and it should just be home.
Yeah. There's
Okay.
nothing other than the
This is
quiz
all-
and the,
Huh, that is bizarre.
yeah, that's all I had this morning. This syllabus is
New
not
to
there
this,
either.
so I mean, I don't know where I'm going.
Well, you got the two important things, right? The assignments. Okay, I'll have to ask somebody who knows a little bit more about Canvas why that's not showing up. So if I go to my home button, I have all these published. So they're supposed to show in your, oops, wait a minute, there we go. One click. And now try it, reload it. Thank you for pointing that out. Is it there? Okay, thank you.
There's more there. Yes, I see the text.
Okay, so what happened is that I hit all these publish buttons down here, but I didn't hit the top one, right? Okay, so there we go. Thank you for pointing that out. Perfect. Okay.
Recorded lectures, you do those as you go, like. down-
Yes, so I'm going to be recording the lecture today,
Okay, yep, and you just add.
and then I added on there. So I try to record the lectures, but occasionally, something might not be turned on or some, because other people use this room. So if the technology fails me, I use Google Hangouts and I do YouTube. Sometimes Google Hangouts is unavailable. So you want to make sure that you maybe have somebody that you can work together. If I don't get the lecture recorded, you can get their notes. Okay. And it should be fairly simple because in here, everybody is going to be in one lab. So all of you are going to come to the lab today, right, at 2 o'clock. And the lab is downstairs in ST 115. Okay. So the labs are every week at 2 o'clock. And we just have one lab. So you want to make sure that you try to come to the lab because there's no really way to make it up once the week is over because we're going to have labs going all the time in that particular room. Okay, so if we look at the syllabus, I kind of went over the course description and why you might be in this class, and then how to do well. It's really important in biology in particular because there's so much terminology and so many words that you are going to be learning how to use that you study daily rather than waiting to the very last minute to study in order to do well in the class. If you look on the second page, required course materials is just that online textbook. And then I have the grading. So we have these online quizzes, but you're also going to be having in-class quizzes. So the first in-class quiz is going to be a week from today. And the quizzes only encompass the information that we've taken or that we've talked about thus far. So for the one on Monday, which is worth 15 points, you are going to just need to study the information from today and Wednesday. And then the next quiz is just going to be over those 2 days. So they're not cumulative because they're not. However, the midterm exam is over everything up to the midterm, and then we have a comprehensive final exam, which is everything from the very beginning of the class. Lab notebooks are pretty important. I would recommend using a 3 binder for the lab notebooks. You're going to not turn your labs into the every class or every lab period, but you're only going to turn your lab notebook in near the third or fourth week, and then at the very end of the quarter, and you're going to get those turned back to you and graded. So you want to bring your lab notebook to lab, and each lab is worth about 25 points. And if you miss a lab, there's going to be opportunity to make up that lab when we do, at the very end, when we do some extra credit. Okay, so if you look at the very back page, here is the tentative schedule. So today we're going to be doing chapter 1, and then we're going to be moving into chemistry and cell structure, cell reproduction, and then the last part of the term is primarily genetics. So we're going to take a look at Mendelian genetics, but also molecular genetics and biotechnology. So are there any questions about this schedule? Okay, so if you do have any questions at any point in time, just let me know. So to start today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand out a little sheet, and you can find somebody in the class to work with if you like. And it's just a little matching sheet. So this is kind of like just to get you in the space of studying human biology. So this should only take maybe 15 minutes, and there's also a back side to it. And so this information can also appear on the quiz, or on the midterm, or on the final. So this is something that you're not going to turn into me, but you're going to study. You're going to keep it and study it. So I'll turn some lights on so you don't need to see. Read them on. Oh, I thought you were going to say, oh. Okay, so you can find somebody you want in your, or move towards them. This is Biology 112?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So I just talked about the syllabus, and we're just doing this little handout if you want to find somebody to sit next to.
You can sit right by.
Oh, okay, remember that side.
Okay, so you can see.
might be that too, yeah. There's a few of those. They're double. I don't think double, it's just something. We'll see. I'm sure she can. She is seven. They're- Yeah. I think J is 10. H is or it could. Or not. Okay. Six. So it's a great heading system. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Twelve. Apologies. Trees and
Okay, just a couple more minutes. And if you're done, I put the answers up for the first side of the page. You can correct it. Okay, so let's talk about the disciplines in medicine. So if you look on the back page, what is the study of cancer? If you had cancer, who would you go to see? An oncologist, excellent. How about if you have kidney infections or problems, your urologist? An older person having problems? Yeah, so a gerontologist. Concern about endocrine hormones, endocrinology. So that would be number 10. Or Matt has phenylketonuria, which is caused by a genetic defect at the cellular level. So that would be cytology. So cyte means cell. So cytology is the study of cells. If you might have ingested a toxic substance, you would go see a toxicologist. So that would be 7. Dr. McKeon studies the occurrence of mosquito-borne diseases. Epidemiology. Okay. If you have skin problems, you go see a dermatologist, right? Derm means skin. If you have blood problems, you would go see hematology. So think about hemoglobin, right? Is the pigment that carries oxygen. If you have problems with your eyes, you would go see an ophthalmologist. If you have problems with your reproductive tract, you would go see in your female gynecologist. If you have foot problems, podiatry. So pod means foot. Okay. If you are diagnosed with atrial fibrillation, cardiologist. If you have a premature baby, neonatologist, so newborn, right? Neo means new, nate means to be born. And if you have a knee injury, that would be a orthopedics. Okay, so you can see how some of those words relate to roots that describe how or what they mean. And so a lot of the terminology that we go over in biology, a lot of it has its basis in Greek or Latin roots. And so sometimes it's just a matter of learning what those roots mean so that you can understand the terminology when it's written in reference to something completely different. Okay, did everybody get these answers up here? Can I erase them? Okay, let me turn some lights off. Can everybody see the screen okay? So when we spoke about studying human biology, we kind of have 2 different components, 2 different areas of emphasis, and they're actually very intertwined and interrelated. So we can talk about the anatomy. Oh, man, this is a brand new board with a brand new pen. I'm gonna have to learn how to write with it. I think I need to write slower, maybe not. I'm sure it's gonna get better as I progress here. Okay, so anatomy. This has to do with structure. Oh, come on, don't freak out on me. Okay, so this has to do with, like for example, if we are looking at the structure that you can see in the heart, right? So you can see the chambers, you can see the valves, but really, in order to understand why it is that structure, you also have to look at the mechanism. And so that is under the area, which is referred to as physiology. So this is mechanism. So for example, we could look at the heart structure, but really what in the mechanism we want to, so this is just an example, what we really want to understand is how the blood flows. Okay. So we're not going to be looking at a lot of big structures this quarter. We're going to look at more of the smaller details, including cells and tissues. And so when we look at anatomy, we can say that anatomy is, this would be like gross anatomy. So gross means large. Okay. So looking at the structure of the heart would be under the pretense of gross anatomy. But we're going to look at more of the histology. Right? So the histology is the study of tissues and cells. Okay. So we're going to be looking at more like, what is the muscle tissue? What types of muscle tissue are there? And then we're going to look at like maybe the individual cells and talk about how those cells communicate with one another. And heart tissue is really interesting because each individual cell on its own can actually contract. And if you have individual cells contracting in a petri dish, as soon as they touch, they are able to start contracting synchronously together. So they start contracting together as one. And so that synchronous contraction, how cells are able to go about doing that, is kind of what we're going to be focusing on today. Or not today, but this quarter. Okay. And then the mechanisms are really important. So you need to, so in general, instead of just studying anatomy, generally courses deal with anatomy and the physiology, because really the anatomy does not make any sense unless you look at the mechanism. So sometimes students really like the anatomy part because it's simple memorization, and then they might have a greater problem with the physiology because it's actually understanding the mechanism. And then some students are exactly the opposite. They just hate having to memorize stuff, but they like understanding how things work. Okay? And so these are kind of the two areas of human biology that we study. Okay, so within our body, we have different levels of organization. And so the most fundamental level is the atom. And I don't know why it doesn't like this. It is the atom. Okay. And we're going to talk about atomic structure this quarter, but the atoms that are most common in our body, most prevalent, can be remembered by the acronym SHNOPS. So what do you think C stands for? What type of element, what type of atom do you think we have that is very common in our body that starts with a C? Carbon. Carbon, excellent. How about H?
Hydrogen.
Hydrogen. N?
Nitrogen.
Nitrogen. O?
Oxygen.
Oxygen. P? Ooh. Phosphorus. We have phosphate bonds in our DNA. And how about S? Sulfur. So we have sulfur bonds in our proteins, and that's why proteins fold, for example. Okay? So these are the common elements that we see, or common atoms, types of atoms that we see in our body. And then these atoms come together and they form molecules. So in biology, it kind of differs from chemistry. Molecules in biology are kind of anytime you have two or more atoms together, we call it a molecule. In chemistry, they call them compounds. But we, in biology, we just use the word molecule. And so it's a little bit different. So we can look at the molecule. Okay. So this is the next level. So we have atoms, we have molecules. And so we could have this molecule. And again, chemists would call this a compound. Does anybody know what this molecule is? It's actually one of two things.
Carbon.
Nope. That's carbon, 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens. Anybody know? This is glucose. Okay. So what those numbers mean is that we have in this particular molecule, we have 6 carbon, 12 hydrogen, and 6 oxygen. Okay. that is different than, say, for example, if we have 6 CO2s, okay? So this is carbon dioxide, right? Carbon dioxide, one molecule of carbon dioxide has 1 carbon and 2 oxygen, right? But there's 6 of them, so there's 6 molecules. I can put a 6 up here, and that would mean that I have 6 glucose molecules, okay? So the subscripts and then the numbers in front mean 2 different things. So those would be 6 molecules of carbon dioxide. Okay, so in our bodies, then these molecules form into cells. So that's the next level of organization. And cells are the fundamental unit of life. So these molecules, we say, are not living. So glucose is not living, okay? So this is the fundamental unit of life. This is going to drive me crazy. I had a lecture before this one and it was working just fine. Sometimes I think you have to turn it all off and restart. Okay, so this is the fundamental, or maybe write fast. Okay. So when we talk about cells, cells have all of the characteristics that we as a whole organism do, right? So a cell has a boundary, right? It has a membrane, and it regulates its internal environment. It is also capable of taking in food and getting rid of waste. It has to use energy to maintain its structure, and it is also capable of reproducing. So cells in our body, like skin cells or cells in your bones, in your bone marrow, are constantly undergoing cell division and reproducing, right? So the cell would be considered the fundamental unit of life. And then we have tissues, which are groups of cells that have a similar function. So with a similar structure, because the structure follows the function and function. Okay. So for example, we could have neurons, which are individual nerve cells, right? And then here we would have nervous tissue. Right? So the brain and the spinal cord is composed of nervous tissue, which has all kinds of neurons and also other helper cells associated with it. Then we have the organ. So the interesting thing about organs is they are composed of more than one type of tissue. Okay, so let's look at the biceps brachii. Does anybody know what brachii means? What is this first? What type of structure is this? Muscle. Brachii means arm. Brachial, that's the term for arm, right? Antebrachial is actually the term for the forearm. So the brachial is actually the term for your humerus, your upper arm. And the biceps is the muscle that allows you to flex your upper arm, right? So this muscle, we think, oh, well, that's muscle tissue. But actually, this muscle that allows us to flex our arm is actually an organ. Because it doesn't just consist of muscle tissue, but it also is covered in connective tissue. It also has blood vessels that come to it, which are also organs. And then it also has nerves that come in and innervate the biceps brachii to allow it to contract, right? So this is skeletal muscle, but it also has connective tissue, nervous tissue, right? So it has skeletal muscle tissue. That says connective tissue, nervous tissue, and I'm running out of room, so I'll just put et cetera, okay? So that is actually an organ. Each one of your muscles in your body is actually an individual organ. Your skin is an individual organ. Your brain is actually an organ, right? Your spinal cord is an organ because it's composed of more than one type of tissue. Okay, so these organs form together to form systems. Okay, so systems, you notice that we're going in a hierarchy, so we're putting things together, so we're getting more complex. So systems are composed of more than one organ. Right? So we can talk about, for example, the muscular system. And so this would be all the skeletal muscles in the body. And they're all individual organs, right? So in order for me to move, I generally have to have antagonistic muscles. So my biceps allows me to flex my arm, but my triceps allows me to extend my arm. So they work in antagonistic pairs, right? And then there's all kinds of muscles here that are stabilizing my shoulder joints. So my rotator cuff muscles are all stabilizing, you know, and there's all kinds of other things that are going to allow me to flex and extend. Okay? So that would be a system. So one of the things about anatomy and physiology is we sometimes view biology in what is called reductionism, or with the view of reductionism. Just doesn't like that part. Maybe no, doesn't like that either. Okay, so reductionism. Okay, so reductionism is where we break things down into components in order to study them. So we break things apart to study them. So that's why your textbook, oftentimes in a human A&P course, like you have a whole chapter on the muscular system, and then a whole chapter on the cardiovascular system, and a whole chapter on the nervous system, right? The idea here, however, is that there are some properties that only arise when the components come back together. So the problem with this is that systems interact, right? To create the whole organism. So a more holistic viewpoint right, is looking at systems together. And when we do that, we see that we get what are called emergent properties. Okay. So emergent properties are things that arise from the interaction between the components that cannot be explained by the individual components. And the biggest example that they oftentimes give of this is consciousness, right? So understanding and looking at individual neurons is not going to tell us anything about how we have consciousness. So we actually have to put kind of the whole thing together in order to understand how that works, right? So emergent properties, how would I define this? So emergent properties occur or cannot be explained maybe by looking at the parts. Oops, I just lost that. Well, where did it go? Let's see. There we go. Okay, so emergent properties cannot be explained by looking at the parts. Okay, so we start to put things together. Okay. So science has long, has been really, really good at taking things apart, but now we have to start putting things back together again to understand how they work in coordination. And this is, you probably maybe have experienced this, or especially with older people that have multiple illnesses. So like when my mom was sick, so she would go to the cardiologist, right? And he would prescribe one whole set of drugs, right? And then she would go to the endocrinologist, and they would prescribe a whole other set of drugs, right? So she would go to all these specialists who are prescribing drugs, but they're not looking at how they are interrelated, right? And so you get, maybe sometimes you get drug interactions, right? That would be an emergent property. Two drugs interacting and then something big happens, right? So neuro would be nervous system. So this is looking at how the nervous system influences the immune system. So this is more of a systems holistic view, right? And so you're going to see in the medical community more of this, right? So maybe you could go to the university and take a class on neuroimmunology and understanding how those two systems work, rather than always breaking things down to their smallest components to understand how they work. Does anybody have another example of this? They might have guessed.
Well, I'm just wondering, I have a nerve disease. It's where my immune system attacks my nervous system and leads to stuff.
Right.
So that would be.
Yes, so that would be a perfect example of how you have to understand the nervous system and the immune system. And one of the really interesting things about this is we all know that like when we're stressed out, we tend to get sick more frequently, right? So why is that? And so that would be an emergent property, right? That's the neural knowledge. Okay. So then we have at the highest level, the organism, right? So from systems, then the next level would just be the organism. And in us, right, it's individuals. Oops, levels of organization. Okay. So in your book, there's a diagram that shows this, right? So it just shows how, as we go through, we're kind of adding layers, right? So this would be an example of an organ, would be the bladder, the urinary system, and then the organism. The organism is defined by that, at that level, that is the individual that can produce a whole nother individual. Okay? And so like if you were studying, a new life form, and you had no idea where the organism stopped and where the population began, right? Or where it was that you had the organism. That the organism level is defined by the fact that we can reproduce whole new other individuals, rather than just producing individual cells. Okay. So in your book, they have a kind of a breakdown of what we did when we were talking about, what the different systems did, like the muscular system, the skeletal system, the integumentary system. So some of your quiz questions could come from here, right? So what are the different systems in the body? Integumentary would include your skin, but it also includes your nails and your hair, because those are said to be skin appendages, and they're derived from skin. When we look at the maybe a system you're not familiar with, like maybe the lymphatic system, sorry. They have the lymphatic system. Oh, they don't have the lymphatic system in here. The endocrine system, which includes the major endocrine glands in the body, which include, really interesting, the endocrine system, because there's so little amount of tissue, but it plays such a huge role, right? The production of hormones that circulate throughout your body, in your blood, and it can go to everywhere in your body and have influences. And then the lymphatic system, which was on your handout, the lymphatic system is related to the cardiovascular system because that is what drains excess fluid from the tissues. So when fluid gets lost at the tissues, at the capillaries, for example, the lymphatic system can move it. And so anytime you have swelling in your appendages, that signals that there might be a problem with the lymphatic system. Okay, so we're going to talk about those requirements for maintaining life. And I think in your book they call these the functions of life. The first one is that we have to have boundaries. Right? And these boundaries help to maintain a constant internal environment. So for example, our skin is a big boundary, right? But we also have like mucous membranes, right? And these can be found in the respiratory system, like in your respiratory tract, and also in your digestive system. Because if you think about your digestive system, when you eat stuff, obviously there's bacteria on it, no matter how much you wash it, right? And there can also be fungus on it, no matter how much you wash it, right? So we bring in stuff into our body, and when we bring in air or when we bring in food, the mucous membrane helps to protect us and to prevent invasion, for example. So things aren't able to get into our body and start using it for its own reproduction. We also have metabolism. Right? And so metabolism is all the chemical reactions in your body. And this could include anabolism. So that's ANA, anabolism. So think about anabolic steroids. What do they do? What do anabolic steroids do? They build, right? So they make your muscles bigger. Okay? They can make the muscle fibers get thicker, right? The diameter increase. And so this is the building of molecules. So when we look at proteins, we could have amino acids combining to form protein, right? So this generally occurs inside of our cells. Our cells are little factories, right? And they produce all kinds of proteins. Proteins that are used in the cell, but also proteins that can be secreted. Hormones. Most of the hormones in our body are proteins that are built from amino acids that we take in. Okay. The opposite of anabolism, does anybody know what the word is? Catabolic, yes. So this is catabolism. And this is breaking down. And probably the most important catabolic reaction that we do is what is referred to as cellular respiration. And this is where we break down glucose in the presence of oxygen to release energy. That's a C, sorry, presence of oxygen. Energy in the form of ATP, and we'll talk about that process in a lot of detail this quarter. But remember, if you think about glucose, we said C6H12O6, right? We combine this with 6 oxygen, And what is the byproduct? What do we breathe out? We take in oxygen, and we inspire oxygen, and we expire carbon dioxide, right? Okay. So this is the chemical reaction for cellular respiration. So this means that this is a conversion, right? So notice that glucose is a pretty big molecule, that's all bound together. And then I break it down into smaller molecules, so that's metabolism. And that breaking down releases energy. So this is actually very similar to burning something. So when you burn a piece of wood or if you burn gas, like if you're burning propane, all you're doing is you're taking the propane, which is an organic molecule kind of similar to this, and you're combining with oxygen, you light it, right, and it breaks it down, it combusts, and it produces energy in the form of light and heat. Right? And so this is a catabolic reaction that takes place in our cells. Now the reason why I drew it this way is that it is balanced. So if we look at how many carbon atoms are on this side, there are 6. So this is why I put a 6 in front of this one, because that means that there's 6 carbon atoms here too. There's none here, right? 12 hydrogen atoms, right? So how many do I have here? 12, right? I have 6, 12. And then 6 oxygen. Actually, I have 6 here, and then I have how many here? 12, right? All right, 18. So I have 12 here, and I have 6 here, 18. Right? So they say that this is a balanced chemical reaction. Okay, so metabolism is something that we have to do in order to produce energy, and that actually helps to maintain our boundary, our organization. Okay. We also have movement. Okay. And so when we look at movement, we take chemical energy in the form of maybe glucose, we could use glucose, or we could use ATP, right? And we turn it into mechanical energy. So energy is just the ability to do work. And so when we look at this chemical energy, this is stored energy. And stored energy has another name, and it's called potential energy. Right? So we store energy in this molecule, which is, we don't need to know what it means right now, but this is just a high energy molecule. It's actually adenosine triphosphate. It's got 3 phosphate groups in it. Okay? And then when we break it down, we use it to cause our muscles to contract, right? And what happens is that then we also release heat. Okay. And heat is a byproduct of converting from one form of energy to another. It's kind of like, it's a law of thermodynamics, that when you convert from one energy source to another, we have energy lost as heat. So this is the whole reason why you exercise. If you go running around, right, you're going to get hot, right? And that is just because you're releasing heat as a byproduct of converting from one form of energy into another. And movement obviously is really important for animals because we have to go out and find our food, for example. Okay. And then we have development and growth. So development and growth involves a specific type of cell division. So we have cells dividing and producing identical cells. So this is what is called cell reproduction. And does anybody know when I grow and I develop, what type of cell division is involved in that? Mitosis, yes. So it's called mitosis. So the amazing thing is that I started out, and everybody started out as a single cell. Just think about that, a single cell. And that cell underwent mitosis. And so each cell gives rise to an identical cell, right? If these are my cells, right? And then they give rise to an identical cell, right? Two actually, goes like this, right? And so when you think about it, it is actually a form of exponential growth because we're doubling. Every time our cells divide, they double in number. And so very fast, when these cells divide, we can get a lot of cells really fast. Yes. No, so this is mitosis, right? So mitosis is involved in development and growth. Okay. So the next characteristic, right, is reproduction, and that's where meiosis comes in. Okay. So we have reproduction. I need a new page. Oh. So in animals, we reproduce by producing cells with half the genetic material. So the egg and the sperm are produced in the gonads. So these are specialized organs, and they would be the testes. I'll put the ovary first since I put egg first. The ovary and the testes. Testis is one, right? So the gonads, either ovary or testes, and they produce the egg and the sperm. And what's really interesting is that these cells are essentially immortal, right? Because they get actually passed on to the next generation. So if you have a child, these cells do not die with you, right? So they have a potential for immortality. Right? All the other cells in your body, if you think about it, are cooperating to allow you to potentially reproduce. So if I think about my skin cells are going to die with me, but they keep reproducing to protect me, to protect the egg and the sperm from a biological point of view, right? So the egg and the sperm are produced, and they have half the genetic material. Compared to a body cell. Right? So when they combine, they form a fertilized egg. And this production of the egg and the sperm is through a type of cell division called meiosis, which is a special type of cell division. So meiosis only occurs in the cells in the ovary and the testes, and it produces cells that have half the genetic material, and then they come back together and they produce an organism that is genetically different from you, but because it only has half of your genetic information, and then half from the other. Okay. So those are the things, kind of the maintenance of life, the function of life, of human life, right? And then the next topic is the requirements. So obviously, we as animals need energy. We need nutrients. Okay. These are all necessary for maintaining our cells and kind of maintaining our body, right? Energy and nutrients. We also need water. And water is really important because it is a universal solvent, which means that things go into solution, right? So it carries substances in solution. So glucose, for example, is carried in solution. Hormones are carried in solution. They're carried in your blood, right? And so water is the way that things get transported. It's really important for transporting substances throughout the body. So that's one of the reasons why we need it. Not that just our body is primarily composed of water, right? Like, I don't know, 70% of it, but that it actually is needed to carry substances. Okay. We also need oxygen. What was the name of the chemical reaction I just talked about? Catabolism. Cellular respiration. Doesn't want to go there. Okay. We need a certain atmospheric pressure. Okay. So the atmospheric pressure is that which is exerted by all the molecules that are in the air, right? So it's usually measured in millimeters of mercury, which is the same unit that your blood pressure is measured in. And at sea level and at standard conditions, it's about 760 millimeters of mercury. And what that means is that that is the, if you were going to exert it on a column of mercury, that's where the mercury, it's a standard column, and that's where it would end up at. Right? If you have more pressure, it makes the column smaller. If you have greater or lesser pressure, it would make the column bigger. Okay? So atmospheric pressure is actually really important for respiration. Right? Because oxygen and carbon dioxide must diffuse into and out of the body. And they do that based upon the atmospheric pressure. Okay, so when we breathe oxygen in, it goes in deep into our lungs, and then it actually goes into solution. It actually goes into water. And then it gets transported because it is at a higher concentration. The atmospheric pressure is exerted is higher outside than inside, and so it will move. So we're going to talk about what diffusion is, but it's a passive movement, and this pressure determines how the gases move, right? So when you're up really high and like up on top of Mount Everest, you have to carry oxygen with you, right? Because there's not enough oxygen in the atmosphere, and so you don't get enough oxygen and you die. Right? And so you have to be really careful of atmospheric pressure when you're going from, right? And that's why they pressurize airplanes when you're up there. If they didn't, everybody would die because of the atmospheric pressure. Okay, just a couple more. Temperature. Temperature is important, and primarily it's high temperatures that can be very, very bad. So hyperthermia can actually kill you faster than hypothermia. And this is because high temperatures can cause proteins to unfold. And this unfolding of proteins has a name. And what is it called when a protein unfolds? Does anybody know? What is it called when a protein does not work anymore? So like when you cook an egg, initially it's liquid, and then the proteins in the egg unfold, and then it turns into a solid. And that would be really bad if that happened in your blood. Right? And so, does anybody know what that name is? Nope. That is a protein though, yeah, and that is in your nails and skin, but it's called denaturation. So denaturation. So the proteins will unfold and then they won't do their function, right? So enzymes unfold, they can't do what they're supposed to do, right? Low temperatures slow everything down, right? And so they can kill you too, but generally not as fast as high extreme temperatures will. So that's why when people, one of the reasons why when people drown, it's better if you're in cold water because it'll be easier for you, you'll live longer underwater than if you're in warm water.
Did you say that word again?
It's called denaturation. So you're taking away the nature of the proteins so they no longer function. Okay, so I'm going to stop there for today. And so we're going to talk about homeostasis and homeostatic mechanisms. And then we're going to start on chemistry. And then we're, today in lab, we're going to look at the orientation of the body and regional terminology. So we'll be working on that today. And we're also going to be looking at the major bones of the arms and the legs in lab. Yep. I would bring a 3-ring binder if you have one. If you don't have one today, just bring paper.
Right.
So you put things right on. Yeah. Yep. That's it.